Welcome to Conspiracist. Today we're doing a focused examination of a pretty striking hypothesis. It suggests governments might be intentionally concealing evidence about something called parental alien abductions. So our deep dive today will look really rigorously at the claims, the reasoning, and the information available in the sources you shared. We'll stay objective, just dissecting the core ideas based strictly on that material.
Okay. So maybe the best place to start is just defining parental alienation itself, as the sources describe it. It essentially refers to a situation where a child shows unwarranted resistance or hostility towards one parent. Often this seems to stem from the actions of the other parent.
Right, the alienating parent. What sort of actions are we talking about?
Well, the sources mention things like undermining the child's love for the targeted parent, maybe sharing inappropriate negative details about them, also encouraging defiance or, forcing the child to choose sides, that sort of thing.
Okay, but it's important to notice, Ned, that the sources also highlight a debate here.
Absolutely. They make it clear that while parental alienation describes these behaviors, its status as a formal medical or psychological syndrome, well, that's still debated. There aren't universally agreed upon diagnostic criteria.
That distinction feels key, a description versus a diagnosed syndrome. So let's think about how this might intersect with beliefs about, say, alien abductions and conspiracy theories more broadly.
Yeah.
The sources mention some psychological elements often found in beliefs about alien abduction, right?
Yes, they do. Things like how people interpret ambiguous stimuli or a tendency to see events as caused by deliberate actions. There's that term agenticity.
Agenticity, right.
Yeah.
Our tendency to assume there's an agent, a who, behind something happening, especially if it's unexplained.
Exactly. And also confirmation bias, paying more attention to information that fits what we already believe.
And you can see how those cognitive shortcuts, looking for patterns to assume intent, how they could potentially lead someone towards belief in a cover-up, whether it's UFOs or something else.
Precisely. And this idea of a government cover-up has quite a history in UFO theories, doesn't it?
It does. The sources trace it back. Early on, with flying discs in the 40s, some speculated it was secret tech. But then, by the mid-50s, you had figures like Donald Keyhoe actively claiming the U.S. government was hiding the truth about extraterrestrial contact.
He even talked about a silence group, didn't he? A sort of secret body within the government dedicated to keeping it quiet.
Yeah, that concept really took hold. And then you get the legends of the Men in Black.
Ah, yes, the might-be purported government agents showing up to intimidate UFO witnesses, telling them to keep quiet.
It's a powerful narrative, isn't it? Hidden control, suppressing knowledge. So we had this established narrative structure in UFO lore. Now, thinking about the hypothesis we started with, concealed parental alien abductions, do the sources suggest similar structural elements are at play?
Well, within the framework of the hypothesis itself, you might find anecdotal claims that echo those elements. People who believe in it might feel their experiences are dismissed, ignored by authorities.
Yeah.
And they might suspect government bodies are deliberately overlooking or even hiding information relevant to these supposed abductions. Personal stories, shared experiences within communities that can definitely strengthen belief.
But it's crucial to balance this with alternative explanations, especially those offered for alien abduction claims, as the sources do.
Yes, very important. The material discusses things like sleep paralysis, that feeling of being awake but unable to move, often with hallucinations, and also suggestibility, how memories aren't perfect recordings. They can be influenced, even unintentionally created, maybe through leading questions or hearing other stories.
The Betty and Barney Hill case is mentioned as a really influential early example. Initially, the psychiatrist, Dr. Simon, thought Betty's nightmares might relate to the stress they faced as an interracial couple back then.
Right, but it was under hypnosis that the detailed abduction narrative emerged, first from Betty, then apparently corroborated by Barney.
Which immediately brings up questions about hypnosis and memory reliability, doesn't it? One source even gives an example, someone called Emma, who first believed she was an abductee. But later, she came to think those memories were probably false, created by suggestive questioning during hypnosis.
Yeah, that's a powerful illustration of how memory can be malleable. It underlines why we need to consider these alternative frameworks. And this leads into the social and psychological aspects, too.
How so?
Well, there's something called the social compellingness theory. It basically suggests we have this drive to explain things, especially confusing or upsetting things, in terms of social interactions. We look for intention, for meaning within a social context.
So we naturally try to build shared understandings. especially when things are weird or ambiguous.
Kind of, yeah. And this might draw people towards narratives maybe like alien abduction or maybe the hypothesis we're discussing because they offer a sense of coherence for difficult experiences.
One source brings up this idea that people drawn to UFO narratives might be seeking a kind of cultural authority or recognition they feel they lack elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It gives the example of working-class ghost hunters finding community and importance in paranormal investigation. A parallel, perhaps.
It's presented as a possible parallel, yes. A way to find meaning and belonging within a specific belief system. Interestingly, the sources also note demographics sometimes associated with UFO abduction reports, often middle to upper middle class, educated white females, which apparently overlaps somewhat with demographics involved in the ritual abuse survivor movement from a few decades ago.
That demographic point is interesting. Maybe it ties back to that social compellingness finding a narrative framework within a particular social group to make sense of things.
It's one possible interpretation offered, yes. Now, shifting slightly, let's look at how established medical understanding or the lack thereof plays a role. The Queensland judgment concerning factitious disorder imposed on another, FDIA, is relevant here.
FDIA. That used to be called Munchausen syndrome by proxy, right?
Correct. And the judgment stresses that terms like Munchausen by proxy are descriptions of behavior. They aren't necessarily formally recognized diseases with globally accepted diagnostic criteria.
Okay, so that highlights how, in complex situations involving reported conditions, there might not always be one single agreed-upon diagnostic box, which could lead to different interpretations. Maybe like the debates around parental alienation syndrome.
Exactly. It serves as a point of comparison. And this brings us right back to the contentious nature of parental alienation itself. The sources are clear about the criticisms. Some argue it lacks strong empirical backing.
And that it can potentially be misused.
Yes, potentially misused to dismiss valid claims of illness. That's a serious concern raised in the material. A really critical point emphasized is the prerequisite for considering alienation. There generally needs to have been a previously positive, abuse-free relationship between the child and the targeted parent.
That seems absolutely vital. If there was abuse, a child's reluctance wouldn't be unwarranted. It would be a protective response.
Precisely. The sources stress that the bar for calling a child's resistance unjustified should be very high and carefully evaluated.
Okay. So bringing this all together and focusing back on the core hypothesis about government concealment of parental alien abductions, what do the sources actually say in terms of direct evidence?
Well, this is the crucial takeaway. The provided sources don't contain direct evidence to support that specific claim. There's no explicit proof presented in this material of a government conspiracy intentionally hiding parental alien abductions.
So the discussion has really been about exploring potential interpretive connections, looking at structural similarities between different belief systems, different conspiracy narratives.
That's right. We've looked at psychological factors, social contexts, how beliefs can form and resonate. We've examined the frameworks around alien abduction beliefs and the separate complex issue of parental alienation. But it's vital for listeners to understand, based only on these sources, we haven't found evidence confirming the central hypothesis of governmental concealment of this specific phenomenon.
Yeah, the focus was on the structure of the idea, not validating the idea itself from this material.
Exactly. But this exploration still offers, I think, valuable insights. It shows how personal experience, belief systems, and narrative power can all intertwine. It really encourages critical thinking about where beliefs come from, how they spread, and the constant need to separate subjective conviction from verifiable evidence.
It makes you think about why certain stories gain traction, what needs they might fulfill.
It does. And perhaps thinking beyond these specific sources, one might also reflect on the sheer difficulty of ever proving intentional government concealment of something like this. The challenges in getting objective evidence, interpreting it, they would be immense, wouldn't they?
That's a very fair point. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hypothesis surrounding governmental concealment of parental alien abductions. We've carefully unpacked the layers, drawing strictly from the frameworks presented in your sources on both alien abduction beliefs and the complexities of parental alienation. It really highlights that intricate dance between personal experience, our belief systems, and the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the world. We definitely encourage you to continue thinking about these perspectives and perhaps delve deeper into the research around both parental alienation and alien abduction claims. Thanks for listening to Conspiracist.